Breaking news headlines can, they can often feel a bit distant, but this one is visceral. It's immediate. And it speaks to a profound shift in military reality. Ukraine buried all the Russian tanks in Donetsk, and that's dated today, December 23, 2025. Now, this is not just a headline. It's a statement about the absolute failure of conventional warfare. Before we dive into the wreckage, into the data, a quick appeal to you, our listener, because we know you recognize the stakes here. Subscribe to Defense Reports. It's your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. I'm Alex. Join me with Arya in the latest Deep Dive by Defense Report for a sharp, no-nonsense breakdown of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today, we're going to cover this exact sensational claim. We're going to analyze what buried all the tanks truly means, both on the front lines and, in the halls of power.
That headline has a huge emotional weight to it, doesn't it? And the tactical reality behind it, well, it confirms a key point we've been watching. The Donbass region, as we're now entering the 46th month of this conflict, has become the definitive incinerator of conventional mechanized maneuver. So our mission today is to do a detailed post-mortem, really, on this Russian armored degradation in Donetsk. We'll look at the shift from maneuver to just sheer brutal attrition.
Okay, let's unpack this for everyone listening.
Yeah.
What are the, say, three core conclusions, the big takeaways that explain this massive ongoing loss of armor?
I think it boils down to three inescapable truths right now. First, maneuver is deceased. Any large concentration of armor is now instantly visible, instantly targetable because of UAVs. The battlefield is just too transparent. Second, attrition is the strategy for both sides, really. This isn't a war of deep operational movement anymore. It's a grinding positional fight to bleed the opponent dry. And third, and this is so critical, the information war is the decisive terrain. The propaganda around these tank losses is almost as impactful as the physical losses themselves.
Let's start with the literal meaning of burial. When the headline says buried armor, we're talking about a real physical thing on the ground, right?
Yeah.
But if maneuver is dead, why are they still trying to push with these high-tech tanks?
It's this collision of rigid doctrine and a very adaptive defense. The Kurakov sector in Donetsk is a perfect example. The 46th Separate Airmobile Brigade there, they haven't just relied on missiles. They use engineered defenses, these anti-tank bulwarks we call dragon's teeth. And they're not just obstacles, they are strategic tools.
Right, so the massive concrete pyramids aren't meant to stop a tank head-on. It's more about influencing where it goes.
Precisely. They're placed on the surface to funnel armored columns off the main roads, like the route for Maximilianivka. And once that column is forced into the open, off-road, that's when this three-step sequence of destruction begins.
Okay, so walk us through that. How does that sequence create a graveyard of steel?
Well, step one is funneling and delay. The dragon's teeth force the column to slow down, bunch up, and try to navigate really poor terrain. Step two is immobilization. And this is where the sheer terror of that battlefield transparency kicks in. Ukrainian FPV drones.
These are the small, fast ones, the racing quadcopters.
Exactly. A soldier with goggles is basically flying a guided missile. They hit the lead vehicles, and that lead vehicle, it instantly becomes a roadblock.
And the whole column behind it is now trapped, sitting ducks.
That's it. Which brings us to step three, liquidation. With the column stalled, more drones, artillery, everything starts targeting the weak spots, engine decks, turret rings. The 46th Brigade just repelled a massive attack, dozens of vehicles, and they took out a BMP-3 with a drone just like that. The sheer precision and persistence of these unmanned systems just makes a traditional breakthrough almost futile.
And the burial part is when the wreckage is just left there to rot. It literally sinks into the mud and the snow.
It becomes a marker, a signal for future strikes, a no-go zone. The entire area is just choked with this immobile, rotting steel.
So you have the physical wreckage, but how quickly does that turn into a digital battle? The information war is being waged over these very same graveyards.
Oh, instantly. The digital front is incredibly intense. We just saw a classic disinformation tactic from pro-Kremlin sources. They tried to repurpose old wreckage from the 2022 Kharkiv counteroffensive. They claimed it was a current Ukrainian tank graveyard near Mern.
And how was that exposed?
OSINT, open source intelligence. Projects like Shahid and Russo-Ukrainian war spotting use satellite imagery, geolocation, video analysis, and just, picked it apart immediately. But the key thing is the effort required now to verify a single vehicle loss is almost as strenuous as the effort to destroy it in the first place. It proves that third point, the info war is decisive.
Moving on from the tactics, let's talk about the sheer scale. The quantitative attrition is frankly hard to even visualize. It's late 2025. What is the cumulative bill for this failure?
The numbers are, they're just staggering. As of today, December 23rd, 2025, cumulative Russian losses are at 11,446 tanks and 23,792 armored combat vehicles. I mean, just to put that in perspective for you, the entire active U.S. armored fleet is much, much smaller than that loss figure. And then you have 93,166 tactical UAVs lost. It just shows this relentless war being waged at the lowest level.
11,000 tanks. That's not just a loss. That's a strategic exhaustion of modern military capital. What does that do to the quality of their fighting force?
The implications are structural. They've burned through their modern hulls, so now they're forced to rely on these deeply retrofitted Soviet models, the T-62s, the T-55s. We're also seeing this degradation of true protection. They're moving away from heavy armor toward these exposed golf cart tactics.
Golf carts, you mean actual civilian vehicles?
Light civilian vehicles repurposed to move troops because they simply don't have enough functioning, protected APCs left.
This has to be balanced against territorial gains, though.
Good.
They have gained some ground, but is it translating into any kind of strategic success?
And that is the territorial paradox of attrition. Yes, between November 18 and December 16, they gained about 215 square miles, but the price they paid for that dramatically slowed them down. The weekly advance rate plummeted sixfold, from 55 square miles a week to just 9. They're buying tiny patches of land at a 6-to-1 cost ratio. The deeper Ukraine digs in, the slower and more expensive it gets.
And their ultimate objective, taking all of Donetsk Oblast, still requires them to conquer what's being called the Fortress Belt.
The Fortress Belt, yes. A line of heavily fortified cities. Pokrovsk, Kostiantynivka, Druskivka. These are large urban centers. When you model a current rate of these costly battles against the distance they still have to go, well, the analysis suggests it would take Russia at least another 2 to 3 years. And that timeline is just completely incompatible with the rate they're burning through equipment and, crucially, manpower.
Which brings us from the buried metal to the human cost. And that's the most critical part of an attrition war, isn't it? What is this casualty rate doing to the Russian manpower base?
It creates a structural deficit. I mean, it's simple math. Russia claims it's recruiting about 32,800 contracts per month. That sounds like a lot until you see the casualty rate. Throughout 2025, they've been suffering an average of 34,600 casualties a month. So that's a permanent 2,000 soldier deficit month after month. It forces a continuous degradation of the entire force.
So it's not a one-for-one replacement. When a tank crew is lost, they aren't replaced by another trained tank crew.
Exactly. The burial of armor leads directly to the cannibalization of technical skill. Specialized soldiers, tank crews, artillerymen are being reassigned into what are essentially disposable infantry assault units. We keep hearing them tragically called meat assaults. It's a tactic to maintain pressure with bodies, but it ensures that any remaining armor is operated by less capable people, which just feeds the cycle of loss.
And the personnel who are just listed as missing. That highlights a really tragic unseen cost of this war.
It's a huge demographic and ethical crisis. Only about 4% of missing Russian personnel are ever recovered. And that has led to over 48,000 documented DNA test requests from relatives back home just desperately searching. Their fates are officially unacknowledged, functionally buried in the Donbass. And at the same time, we have to mention the undermining of Ukrainian demographics. The forced deportation of about 50 civilians, mostly elderly, from Probovske in Sumy Oblast. It's a war crime, and it's aimed at weakening Ukraine's long-term human potential.
So if the battlefield reality is this slow, this costly, this degrading, why does the Kremlin maintain this position of absolute unshakable confidence? I guess this raises the question, how effective is their cognitive warfare at masking all this?
The goal of that cognitive war is to manufacture a narrative of inevitable victory. The hope is to coerce Ukraine and the West into just giving up. On December 19, President Putin reaffirmed his maximalist war aims. Complete withdrawal from 4 oblasts, neutral status for Ukraine, and, the impossible demands of demilitarization and denazification. He needs the West to believe his system can just withstand infinite attrition.
But the territorial claims he uses to back that up are, well, they're wildly exaggerated.
They're blatant distortions, yes. He celebrated the seizure of Seversk, a town of only 11,000 people. But independent analysis confirms it took them 41 months of grueling combat to get it. Or look at Lyman. He claimed Russian forces held 50% of the town. The reality, confirmed by OSINT, was 2.9%. It's all designed to create an illusion of collapse and force a diplomatic concession.
And it's the same distortion on the economic front. We hear constantly about resilience, but what's the truth behind that mirage?
Well, the official claims just don't hold up. Putin projected inflation at around 5.6 to 5.8%. Independent estimates, like from the U.S. Treasury, put the actual rate at over 20% back in October. The war machine has vacuumed up so much labor that it's causing severe shortages in the civilian sector, driving up wages unsustainably. To fund it, the Russian central bank had to sell physical gold reserves for the first time in late 2025 just to meet its budget. That isn't resilience, that is structural stress.
So this maximalist stance, combined with that economic desperation, it means there's really no diplomatic off-ramp that Russia is willing to take right now.
That's the hard reality. They explicitly rejected the U.S. proposed Christmas ceasefire. And they're rejecting the U.S. 28-point plan, the evolving Ukrainian-American 20-point frame, all of it. Why? Because those frameworks require Russia to negotiate without guarantees on their demands for Crimea and the four oblasts. And those are non-starters for Ukraine and the West.
Okay, so despite that grinding attrition and the diplomatic deadlock, let's pivot to the resilience of Ukraine and the crucial long-term commitment from its European partners. What signals are we seeing that reinforce Ukraine's staying power?
We can actually look at the fall of Siversk again, not as a Russian victory, but as a sign of their exhaustion. The forces that finally took it were heavily understrength. Composed of those reassigned personnel we talked about, it highlights the decay they're suffering just for these marginal gains. But more importantly, Europe is fundamentally changing the long-term economic game. On December 18, the EU agreed to provide Ukraine with a massive interest-free loan. We're talking 90 billion euros. That's about $105 billion for 2026 and 2027. And crucially, the loan is conditional on Russia eventually paying reparations. This is a profound political and economic commitment. Europe is guaranteeing Ukraine's solvency years into the future.
And all the while, Ukrainian forces keep demonstrating that ability to strike deep behind the lines, keeping Moscow on edge.
That asymmetric capability is essential. We just saw the likely assassination of Lieutenant General Vanil Savarov in Moscow City on December 22. That shows incredible reach. And you have the continued strikes on rear assets, like the Russian 92nd Riverboat Brigade base in occupied Crimea. These actions are a constant reminder to Moscow that the cost of this war isn't just contained to the Donbas.
So to summarize the findings of this deep dive then, the burial of Russian tanks is definitive evidence of a profound shift. The war has moved from maneuver to a pure attritional model, completely dominated by unmanned systems and battlefield transparency.
It really is the death of conventional armor doctrine. The old metrics, number of tanks, thickness of steel, they're becoming obsolete. They've been replaced by persistence, electronic warfare density, and the political will of Ukraine and its allies. That fortress belt stands as a monument to the staggering cost of the Kremlin's ambition. A slow-motion collapse measured in square miles and thousands of lost lives.
And a final thought for you to take with you, connecting this modern war to deep history. As soldiers fight and tanks are buried in that Donbas soil, the digging of new defensive trenches across central and northeastern Ukraine is literally destroying ancient burial sites, historical artifacts. The Scythian kurgans, markers of the deep past, are being crushed by the machinery of total war. It's a poignant metaphor, really, for the thousands of young Russian soldiers whose fates, evidenced by those 48,000 DNA tests, remain officially unacknowledged, buried forever in that same churning earth.
You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex and Aria, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry.
Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.